Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
October is here and the Padres are still playing ball. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi, and tonight the Pods are taking on the Atlanta Braves for the first game of the Wild Card Series at Petco Park, and that means big business for East Village restaurants and bars. KPBS reporter Alexander Nguyen was near the ballpark today talking to some businesses as they prep for the postseason.
As Eric Tesmer and his staff were busy setting up the restaurant to open this morning, they were already anticipating a big crowd this afternoon. Bar Basic is steps away from the stadium.
We're so close, as they say, we can throw a baseball into the stadium.
He says his pizza restaurant business is dependent on how well the Padres do and how well their season goes.
There's a lot of other activities and concerts and conventions and stuff that help, but really our survival is based on how well the Padres do.
Last year, when the Padres failed to make the postseason, he saw a drop in sales. Many restaurants around the ballpark are huge supporters of the Padres, as evidenced by all the flags and signage.
Being downtown San Diego, Gaslamp is driven by the convention center, but the Padres are that wild card, literally. So when the Padres do well, the streets get flooded.
Josh Smith is the general manager at Water Grill San Diego. He says reservations have increased dramatically for the Wild Card Series.
Last year we missed the playoffs, so unfortunately, but 2 years ago it was awesome down here. So the energy is back, so I think the team is going to go a long way.
That's how a lot of Padres fans feel too.
Padres! That's where we going with the Padres.
Johnny Fraschetti flew in from Texas just for the game. He's a diehard Padres fan.
I have loved the Padres since I was a kid. Born and raised in Encinitas. I stay up every night in Austin, way too late, watching this team. It's the most exciting it's ever been.
And he thanks his very understanding wife for letting him go to Game 1 of the Wild Card Series tonight.
I have 3 young kids, and I'm here because of her, and she's watching them, but I get to go to the game, and I couldn't be more stoked.
Fans aren't the only ones stoked. Business owners are too.
We have been here for 20 years, and to watch the Padres grow and grow and grow, and to be able to make it to the playoffs with a great team that looks like they can go all the way is awesome for us.
Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
Jumping ahead to tonight, we're dropping down to a low around 64 here closer towards the coast. We are still talking about a few low clouds, especially late in the day and early in the day. That may cause some visibility issues, though overall temperatures still pretty comfortable along the coast. Things heating up though further inland. We'll tell you how hot temperatures get this week into the weekend coming up.
In just a few minutes, vice presidential candidates Republican Ohio Senator J.D. Vance and Democratic Minnesota Governor Tim Walz will face off in their first debate. Julia Benbrook is in New York City with more on what to expect tonight.
The stage is set for the vice presidential debate hosted by CBS in New York City. Ohio Senator J.D. Vance and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz going head-to-head for the first time. Vance is a 40-year-old best-selling author and first-term senator. He'll make the case for former President Donald Trump.
The way I see the debate is very simple. It's an opportunity where for 90 minutes, Governor Walz and I are going to debate the issues that matter to the American people.
A source says Vance will likely attack Walz on his military service and label him as a liberal in moderates clothing.
He comes across as just a folksy, ag-friendly outdoorsman until you start peeling back the layers, and then you realize that he's more radical than Kamala Harris.
But Vice President Kamala Harris's aides are betting on what they describe as the everyman appeal of Walz to draw contrast with Vance. Walz is a 60-year-old governor and former congressman who often leans on his background as a teacher and high school football coach.
I expect him also to be talking directly to Americans about what's at stake in this election and not getting too caught up in the nonsense that J.D. Vance throws his way.
The vice presidential candidates could get the last word. The presidential nominees have not yet agreed to another round. Reporting in New York, I'm Julia Benbrook.
And you can watch a live simulcast of the vice presidential debate right here on KPBS. The 90-minute debate starts at 6 o'clock tonight, followed by PBS News special analysis. President Joe Biden is calling on both sides in a massive port strike to return to the negotiating table. As Laura Aguirre explains, Hurricane Helene's devastation across multiple southeastern states is only amplifying the urgency to reach a deal.
They are taking it all the way to the picket line. Nearly 50,000 members of the International Longshoremen's Association went on strike at the stroke of midnight Tuesday.
We're out here for one reason, fighting for our rights, fighting for our families.
Our members have done the homework. They know their worth, and essentially they demand fair wages and better benefits.
But after weeks of tense negotiations with the United States Maritime Alliance, acceptable numbers on that worth haven't been reached. The alliance, which represents the major shipping lines, terminal operators, and port authorities, has offered wage hikes and claims the union isn't negotiating in good faith. Many members feel sacrifices made during the pandemic are being overlooked.
We didn't stop working. When the world went home, they couldn't go nowhere, the longshoremen, we worked these docks night and day.
Docks that are now at a virtual standstill along the U.S. East and Gulf coasts. This could stop the flow of a wide array of consumer goods into the country.
You're probably going to pay more for it, and it's going to take longer for you to get it.
The union says it won't be intimidated by a timeline.
Our membership's prepared to wait it out as long as it takes to secure a fair contract.
But the ILA's president does have a prediction.
We'll bring this country down in 3 weeks. Now it's time I want a piece of that pie for my members.
I'm Laura Aguirre for KPBS News.
The San Diego City Council is officially calling for President Biden to declare a state of emergency over the sewage crisis near the border. Their unanimous vote comes a day after ground was broken on an important piece of infrastructure that will help control the flow of sewage going into the South Bay International Wastewater Treatment Plant. San Diego City Council member Vivian Moreno held a news conference before the vote. She lives close to the Tijuana River and sponsored the council resolution. Moreno says repairs to the treatment plant are a positive step, but not nearly enough.
It is a far cry from the over $1 billion in investment needed to completely solve this problem. And the federal government needs to take more action urgently.
$700 million has already been committed to repair and expand the treatment plant. That work is expected to take years to complete. A significant escalation today in the Middle East as Iran launched a ballistic missile into Israel. For the latest on the widening conflict, here is Michael Yoshida in Washington.
Iran has unleashed a massive missile attack on Israel. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps says the attack focused on Israeli security and military targets and launched in response to Israel's killing of Hezbollah's leader and others in Lebanon recently. The attack, not a total surprise, but it does level up concerns of a widening regional conflict.
This is a significant escalation by Iran, a significant event.
An escalation the Biden administration is watching closely.
Based on what we know now, the attack appears to have been defeated and ineffective. Make no mistake, the United States is fully supportive of Israel.
This all comes after Israel's launch of a ground operation in southern Lebanon targeting Iran-backed Hezbollah. Israeli officials described the ground offensive in Lebanon as localized raids. Once the air attack by Iran was underway, Israeli military leaders said they were ready for it, and so were the people of Israel.
We dealt with such a threat before in the past, and we will deal with it now. I call on the public to continue acting responsibly as you did throughout the war.
Some Iranian missiles fired at Israel Tuesday night made direct impact in central and southern Israel, the Israeli military spokesperson said, adding that Iran's actions today will have consequences. In Washington, I'm Michael Yoshida reporting.
A San Diego-based carrier strike group is being kept in the Middle East amid the escalating conflict. KPBS military reporter Andrew Dyer has more on what that means.
On Sunday, the Pentagon announced the USS Abraham Lincoln and its strike group will remain in the Middle East due to an evolving security situation. The Navy's maintained an elevated presence since the latest conflict began following the Hamas attacks in Israel a year ago. The conflict has escalated significantly over the last week as Israel expanded its operations into Lebanon, killing a key Hezbollah leader and a senior Iranian general. Iran launched about 200 missiles at Israel today in response. The Pentagon says 2 Navy destroyers fired about a dozen interceptors at the missiles. Another San Diego-based carrier, the Theodore Roosevelt, left the region last month after having its deployment extended in response to the conflict. It's currently in the Western Pacific heading home. The East Coast-based carrier Harry S. Truman is en route to the Mediterranean and could arrive next week, freeing the Lincoln to rotate back to the Western Pacific and resume its deployment. The Lincoln left San Diego in July. Andrew Dyer, KPBS News.
I'm Jeff Bennett. Tonight on the NewsHour, Iran fires a barrage of missiles on Israel, further inflaming tensions in a region on edge. That's at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Recent legal complaints claim staff at a San Diego County-owned emergency shelter sexually abused more than 100 children over decades. KPBS reporter Katie Hyson says the complaints blame county policy.
The A.B. and Jesse Polinsky Children's Center is a 24-hour facility. It provides temporary emergency shelter for children. It's often a first stop before foster care. The county says those children must be taken from their families for their safety. But dozens of recent complaints from a national law firm claim the county did not keep those children safe. That between 1993 and 2023, center staff sexually abused children as young as 2 years old and threatened the children to keep them from reporting. The attorneys blame the county for failing to adequately screen and supervise center staff and allegedly ignoring reported abuse. At the time of this reporting, a county spokesperson has not responded to a request for comment. Katie Hyson, KPBS News.
Governor Gavin Newsom's recent ban on hemp products that contain THC is raising concerns among medicinal users. KPBS health reporter Heidi DeMarco says some hemp advocates warn it will especially affect vulnerable individuals, including some children.
10-year-old Sadie Bone has spent countless nights in the hospital. She has a brain disorder called Rett syndrome. She struggles with seizures, insomnia, and anxiety. Sadie's mother has been giving her a cannabidiol, or CBD tincture, recommended by her doctor for almost 3 years. CBD is derived from hemp plants. The tincture also contains trace amounts of THC. That's the compound from cannabis plants that gives pot its high.
And just a few weeks ago, we celebrated her 1-year seizure-free anniversary. And it was a remarkable milestone for her and for us. It allowed her to feel less afraid to leave the house, to go to school.
But Bone worries her daughter's health may now be at risk. In September, the state banned all hemp products containing any THC. It can no longer be sold legally in California stores or purchased online from other states. Adults over 21 can still buy it at medical cannabis dispensaries.
These are very specific types and brands and doses, and you cannot vary, especially when you're talking about a pediatric population.
Governor Gavin Newsom initiated the ban because he says loopholes in the law have made it too easy for kids to access intoxicating products. UC San Diego researcher Natasha Wade studies children who use CBD for health purposes, including 700 in San Diego County.
So even if the parents thought that they were giving just a pure CBD product to their kids, and that's all that those kids had ever used, 23% were still positive for THC.
Wade says her findings highlight the need for regulation of CBD. She says more research needs to be done to confirm hemp and THC do what sellers claim.
The data has not panned out that it does all of those things, and we also have not had the ability to do the research we need to see what it can actually effectively treat.
But for Bone and her family, CBD has been life-changing. She stockpiled tinctures when Newsom proposed the regulation.
I mean, our life has almost restarted, and we can be, go on family adventures and not feel this kind of sense of panic. And that's because of CBD. So
the ban will last until March 2025. Heidi DeMarco, KPBS News.
How is it that a police officer can get in trouble for serious misconduct in one department, but then years later end up in another department with a clean record? Well, it happens more often than law enforcement agencies want to admit. And today we talked to KPBS freelance investigative reporter J.W. August about these so-called wandering officers and a disturbing case involving the El Cajon Police Department and the Navy. J.W., welcome.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you for having me here.
So to start, tell us about wandering officers and how they became such a problem.
It's something that's been going on for decades in California and across the country. It involves city police departments, sheriff's departments, and other law enforcement. When they have a bad apple, for obvious reasons, they have a big incentive to keep the situation involving the bad apple from the public eye. And powerful police unions often fight tooth and nail to protect the officers from discipline and for their misconduct. So the agencies take the path of least resistance, and they quietly let the officer go. And thereby they avoid the public scrutiny and big expense fight with the union. Here's David Loy of the First Amendment Coalition.
So historically, California was an almost complete black hole of police transparency. The public was entitled to virtually no information about the conduct of law enforcement.
So these bad apple cops weren't held accountable and are free to continue their career in another uniform. Research shows a bad apple at one agency becomes a bad apple at another agency.
So it seems that you have allegedly found an example of this here in San Diego. So tell us about Jonathan LaRoche.
Well, in July of this year, the U.S. Attorney's Office in San Diego announced a case against LaRoche. Now, he was a detective with Navy Criminal Investigations, NCIS. It's an agency staffed by civilians, and they do the investigate crime for the Navy against Marine Corps and Navy personnel.
Yeah.
It was a plea agreement. He was charged with two things. The first was the use of excessive force. LaRoche used a chokehold on a handcuffed prisoner who passed out for about 17 seconds. And later in the intake process, when the prisoner was handcuffed to a table, LaRoche grabbed him by his throat and banged his head against the wall. And LaRoche was also charged with filing a false statement, which I found peculiar, meaning he lied on his job application to get into NCIS.
So federal authorities say that LaRoche lied to the Navy. So what specifically did he lie about?
Well, he told the Navy about his history with the El Cajon Police Department. Apparently NCIS never checked. We did with Internal Affairs. KPS requested documents, and Internal Affairs provided us documents into two different investigations, showing that in both cases it was a use of improper force. And in addition, he turned off his camera they were supposed to have on. In one case, LaRoche dropped a handcuffed prisoner to the ground at San Diego County Jail and then bounced his face off the concrete. LaRoche had turned off the body-worn camera, according to the records, but video from the inside of the jail showed the prisoner posed no threat.
So what lies ahead for LaRoche now?
Well, there's also the Las Colinas video. I meant to tell you about that. That's another case involving LaRoche, who was treatment of a female prisoner at Las Colinas. She was also handcuffed. He held her down by the neck after he flipped her over his leg.
Yes, and we have video of that showing right now. Yeah.
Yeah, LaRoche claimed the prisoner tried to kick him, but the camera in the jail's intake area, which we were able to acquire, show that any behaviors on her part, none of her behaviors warranted the kind of treatment he had given to that female prisoner.
So, JW, what lies ahead for him now?
Well, he's sentenced in November, and for his crimes, which he's copped a plea to. for the false statements he made about his work, employment history. It's a $250,000 fine and 5 years in Fed prison. And for his treatment of the federal prisoner, he faces 1 year in prison and a $100,000 fine. Sentencing for LaRoche will include an agreement that he leaves the NCIS and not apply for any other job in law enforcement.
JW, I know you're going to continue to follow this story. As always, impressive reporting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maya.
Well, I want to start you off with your weather headlines, what you need to know as we head throughout the rest of this week. Overall, things are going to stay relatively comfortable here along the coast. That marine layer keeping temperatures there relatively steady if you move closer to shore. Though a different story further inland, as we are talking about a midweek heat risk as those temperatures soar here for areas further inland, even across the mountains into the deserts. And it's still going to be quite a steamy weekend on tap as we head into Saturday and Sunday. Now tonight we're dropping down to lows in the 60s here along the coast as we move further inland. Pretty much the same story. Ramona, we're down to 61 here tonight. Borrego Springs 74, Mount Laguna 64, though we have a heat wave on tap this week. We mentioned that heat, all due to this area of high pressure. It's large and in charge, and it's going to be baking a lot of the southwest with plenty of daily record highs challenged here, especially across the desert southwest, but even posting closer here towards the coast, especially for our inland valleys and for our mountainous terrain. Now that excessive heat warning and that heat advisory that you see shaded in both red and yellow, that's going to go through Thursday evening, though things are still going to be a little hot even as we head throughout the weekend. But it's really this midweek heat risk, especially as we're heading throughout the beginning of October, that we want you to be weather aware about. Make sure you are taking care of yourself in the heat. We have the weather icons busted out with the thermometers. Borrego Springs, you're hitting the triple digits. Similar story even areas further inland. Ramona at 104. San Diego, Oceanside, that's where you'll find the cooler air if you move closer to shore. High is going to be running right around the upper 70s, flirting with 80. That's going to be the case here along the coast here over the next few days, and we'll have plenty of sunshine here to go along with it. Temperatures, though, rise as we head into the end of the weekend, flirting with 90 there we're forecasting for Sunday. Now further inland, highs going to be running in the 90s, but pushing triple digits once again as we head into the beginning of the weekend. It's going to be very hot, dangerously hot. Please make sure that you are taking care of yourself in the big heat. That means drinking plenty of water, staying hydrated, and of course taking plenty of cooling breaks. For the mountains, highs are going to be running in the upper 70s here, so it's still going to be quite warm. And even you'll see some 80s by the end of the weekend. It's looking like it's just going to be straight hot here, though, across the deserts. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Bree Guy.
A Generation X, born between 1965 and 77, also known as the MTV generation or the sandwich generation. And now, according to one new report, the economy's struggling middle child. Michael Yoshida has more.
New data reveals that Gen Xers are facing a financial squeeze that other generations are not. This could have an oversized impact on the broader U.S. economy.
There's a bit of a squeeze.
Many Gen Xers are finding themselves sandwiched, simultaneously caring for their children and their parents.
There are two pressures, I think, on Gen X from both those older and younger ends of the age spectrum.
And the financial strain is starting to show, according to Bank of America Institute senior economist David Tinsley. Internal data from the bank shows average discretionary spending was down 2% year over year in August for a portion of the bank's Gen X customers.
Gen X accounts for over a third of U.S. consumer spending. So the generation really punches above its weight in terms of its contribution to the U.S. economy.
But the data revealed the generation is spending more on average on housing, utilities, and insurance, and focusing more on saving as they near retirement.
The investment saving they're doing outside of retirement saving is about 40% higher than the other generations.
Generation X is likely to inherit trillions in assets from their baby boomer parents, but that windfall may still be years away.
Their spending is peaking out in a sense. So that makes them important in terms of the overall trajectory, I think, of the economy.
And economists say that great wealth transfer or future inheritance will eventually be a big boost for Gen X, but that right now, current financial pressure is likely to continue to dampen discretionary spending. In Washington, I'm Michael Yoshida reporting.
And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom on NPR's Morning Edition. It's often considered cute when an animal goes viral online, but there are real-life implications to an animal becoming too popular. And KPBS Midday Edition has an update on efforts to create more EV charging stations, as well as the future of hydrogen cars. So get ready now for some over-the-top cuteness. 4 adorable meerkat pups have entered the world via the San Diego Zoo for the first litter at the zoo in 6 years. Shaka is the mom of this matriarchal species, and she is reportedly doing very well, ensuring that they are safe. An interesting fact about meerkats is that they are known to kill and eat venomous snakes and scorpions without being hurt because they have some immunity to the venom. And if you are watching them on your screen and that just isn't enough, you can visit them today in their habitat at Conrad Prebys Africa Rocks. Oh my goodness, that face. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.